Seeing the Americas filled with republics, it's surprising that some state projects nearly made many of these countries monarchies. And these projects included Argentina, with a king born in Brazil, and Peru with a king descended from the ancient Incas, and even Brazil becoming the heart of a Hispanic empire in the Americas. And as much as they may seem like fanciful or alternative stories, these plans really did exist and for a moment almost completely changed the fate of Latin America. In today's video, we'll discover how the local elites, a Spanish princess and a French adventurer, almost completely changed the map of the Americas, turning many of the countries we know into monarchies. But before we start the video, if you like our content, become a member of our channel right now. That way, you'll have access to the channel's group and exclusive content, including live classes, so you can explore history behind the scenes even further. The concept of establishing monarchies in Spanish America dates back further than many realize, originating during Spanish rule under Carlos IV. Count Aranda, the king's right-hand man, observing the phenomenon of the independence of the United States, proposed to the King of Spain that the state should cease to be a kingdom and formally become an empire. And, just like in the Holy Roman Empire, there were kings such as the Kingdom of Bohemia or the Kingdom of Burgundy, who were subordinate to the Holy Emperor. In the same way, kingdoms would also be created in Spanish America, such as the Kingdom of Mexico or the Kingdom of Peru. And for that, he would appoint 3 children to rule these kingdoms, being subordinate to the Spanish Emperor. This would please the local elites, who would have greater influence and would also have a legitimate monarchy, which would prevent the disintegration of Spanish America through independence movements, just like what happened in the United States. But with the inertia of King Carlos IV, the project ended up being abandoned, according to the new minister. Godoy was getting closer and closer to France and was implementing policies that would culminate in the French invasion of Spain and the abdications of Bayonne. Through these abdications, the imprisoned Spanish Bourbon handed over the throne to Napoleon's brother, who took power in Spain as king. However, with José Bonaparte coming to power, the viceroyalties in Spanish America gradually began to declare their independence. Since Carlos IV did not carry out Aranda's plan, republics began to emerge throughout Spanish America. But monarchist projects also emerged on American soil, and one of the strongest of these projects was the Argentine monarchy. In the viceroyalty of the Rio de la Plata, Spain intended to appoint the monarch as leader. The idea was to reject the rule of José Bonaparte, who was considered illegitimate, and to put some monarch on the throne in a legitimate way. The problem was that if anyone became king without legitimacy, it wouldn't be much different from the French usurper. The new monarch needed to have royal blood. If he were from the House of Bourbon, even better. And, interestingly, just a few kilometers away, in Rio de Janeiro, was Princess Carlota Joaquina de Bourbon, wife of Dom Juan VI and daughter of Carlos IV, while all the Spanish Bourbons had been imprisoned by Napoleon in France. Dom Juan flees with the Portuguese royal family to Rio de Janeiro, where he would establish the new capital of his empire in the city. And so the daughter of the Spanish king was in the South American continent, just a few kilometers away, and she appeared to be a great candidate to take the crown of Spanish America. In this way, the Carlotism movement emerged, which consisted of declaring Dona Carlota Joaquina as the Queen of Spanish America, and to establish a government in Buenos Aires to keep the Bourbon lands united, while the monarchs of her family were imprisoned by Napoleon. Manuel Belgrano, who was the creator of the Argentine flag and one of the main independence leaders, was one of the biggest supporters of the idea of making Carlota the regent, or even queen. And, along with him, many other Spaniards supported the idea, including the jurists Juan José Castelli, Juan José Paso, Antonio Luis Berruti, and Hipólito Vientes. In fact, the flag of Argentina, designed by Belgrano, is nothing more than an extension of the Bourbon sash, which was worn by the loyal subjects of the kings. So the Argentine flag itself was a monarchist flag. Although Carlota strongly supported the idea, her husband Dom João VI ultimately sabotaged her. The King of Portugal was pressured by the English to take away his wife's dream, since it was not in the English interest. Spanish America, not united but fragmented. And, besides that, all of this would create a big mess in the event of a succession. After all, the sons, Pedro and Miguel, would inherit the throne of Portugal, but also Spanish America. This would end up dragging Portugal into a future war with Spain, just when the royal family had just fled a war against France. In this way, Carlotism is abandoned. But Belgrano also had another card up his sleeve, a plan called the Inca Plan. Belgrano's idea was to restore the Inca royal house under a constitutional paradigm. The monarch would be Dionisio, the Inca, and Penque, who was a deputy representing Peru in the Spanish parliament, was a military man and descended from Inca nobility in the Spanish Empire. But the idea faced a lot of opposition, especially in Buenos Aires. Many feared that by placing an Inca king who would revive that dynasty over time, he would want to move the capital toward Peru, distancing it from Buenos Aires. Argentinians favored Sebastião de Bourbon y Bragança, Dom João's grandson, for coronation. I noticed he had Spanish blood from both his grandmother and father. But the plan also falls apart, faced with the resistance of the Portuguese monarch. The desire for a monarchy in Argentina was not only in Belgrano's plans but also in San Martin's. Unlike Bolívar, who preferred the republican model, this independence general eagerly sought a European monarch who could accept the throne of a constitutional monarchy designed for Spanish America. However, these discussions were interrupted by several civil wars that took place in Argentina between the Unitarian and Federalist parties, such as the Battle of Cepeda in 1820. Thus, Argentina first needed to ensure that the state would remain united under the power of Buenos Aires before deciding which monarch would rule the country. But it wasn't only in Argentina that San Martín tried to consolidate the plan to establish a constitutional monarchy in Peru. After invading the viceroyalty and forcing Peru to become independent from Spanish rule, the general realized that, in that place, the establishment of a monarchy was even more urgent, especially because of the indigenous population of Peru. Peru's Creole elite lacked the independence drive seen in Venezuela or Argentina. In fact, that was one of the regions most loyal to the Spanish crown. In the interior, Peruvian indigenous people opposed the republic and preferred to stay in the Spanish Empire. We can mention Antonio Huachaca as the most important indigenous leader, who even went so far as to found a new state because he refused to follow the orders from Lima. And one of the reasons why the indigenous people wanted to remain in the Spanish Empire was because of the nobility created by the Spanish and the titles given to the chiefs, with many of them being marquises, who could maintain their noble status in the interior regions. So the Peruvian indigenous people were not against independence because they loved King Fernando VII, but rather because the Spanish monarchy guaranteed them the entire system they knew, where they were used to and felt comfortable. It's no coincidence that San Martín meets with Simón Bolívar in Guayaquil, and it's Bolívar who will fight against the Spanish troops, mostly made up of Peruvian indigenous people, and practically force Peru's independence. In 1824, in Mexico, independence led to the formation of the First Mexican Empire, headed by Agustín de Iturbide. He was a general crowned as emperor, but after a conspiracy by the Republicans and General López de Santana, the emperor was deposed and later executed by firing squad. Since then, the republic has prevailed in Mexico, though the country still faced 4 civil wars during this period. And the country changed presidents more than 36 times in just over 40 years of independence. One of them, Antonio López de Santa Anna, was president 11 times and implemented disastrous policies, even taking advantage of Mexico's fragility. The United States practically usurped half of its territory during the Second French invasion. Mexican conservatives even tried to reestablish a monarchy with Maximilian of Habsburg, a liberal monarch and cousin of Emperor Dom Pedro II of Brazil. He was ultimately executed by firing squad. And from his execution onward, Mexico would face 5 more civil wars and several coups and military regimes. And finally, the last attempt to establish a monarchy would come with the kingdom of Araucania and Patagonia, created by the Frenchman Antoinette de Tournelle. The region of Patagonia had never been fully occupied by the Spanish, due to the absence of mineral resources and the ferocity of the native Mapuche tribes. Thus, the French lawyer Antoinette de Tournelle created this state which, although not recognized by anyone, had its own currency and aimed to be a constitutional monarchy. It was more of a delusion, an adventurer's fantasy, than a real attempt at creation. And even though he had contact with some Mapuche leaders, he never had effective control over their territory, and it ended up being annexed by Chile and Argentina in a race toward the south. These failed attempts at monarchy in Spanish America only show how and why the Empire of Brazil was able to prosper in Portuguese America. Unlike Mexico, which lacked monarchical legitimacy, or Argentina, which considered importing a foreign dynasty, Brazil managed to maintain both its independence and a royal house that ruled with uncontested power. With the move of the Braganza dynasty to Rio de Janeiro, Brazilians were ruled by kings who had governed their country for nearly 200 years. And then they were elevated to the status of United Kingdom with Portugal, and later became independent as an empire, but always maintaining the monarchy and the legitimate successor of their king. The Brazil of Dom Pedro II had stability, legitimacy, an authority that was recognized and didn't need to compete for power with anyone, as happened in other parts of the Americas. A reality that was envied in Spanish America and that would only be undone by the military coup that established the Republic in 1889. This would completely reshape Brazil's history. And were you aware of all these monarchy projects in Spanish America? What surprised you the most? So go ahead and leave your comment right now to support our work and take the opportunity to become a member of our channel right now. That way, you'll be able to dive deeper and learn even more about the impressive Iberian history.